Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Content Engine. We believe that every company needs to start thinking like a media company in order to thrive in today's content-driven world. And so the goal of this show is to teach you the mindset, strategies, and tools to help better storytell your brand and scale your own content empire. Today's guest is Callie Kerbo. She's the founder and creative director at Honeycomb Creative Co. And she's a brand development strategist that works with companies to help more effectively storytell their brand across all of their customer touchpoints, from social media to website conversions to customer service. She specializes in work with early stage startups as well as established companies that need to wrap their heads around this whole digital online marketing space. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Callie.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So to start things off, why don't you tell everyone a little more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my background is in weddings and event planning, which makes total sense that I'm in the tech space now. But I came to Austin to dive deep into the world of e-commerce and became fascinated with the idea that brands really are more than just a logo, they're more than just a website, and it's really about telling your story effectively and across all the channels. So I started Honeycomb with the idea that we were going to help people tell their stories in whatever way made sense for who they were and really help them develop a strategy and develop content that really helped them tell their story authentically, uniquely, and in a way that helped them compete with the very competitive and saturated market that is the online market nowadays, to compete with the Amazons of the world and to really find their place in the market that made sense for them.
Working with early stage startups, what are some of the main challenges that you see that when you're coming to a brand and you just see these common pitfalls across many different companies that you work with?
Right. So a lot of times they're coming to me with a great idea, right? So we have an incredible idea to work with, but in some ways they aren't really treating themselves like a big brand. And so a lot of times they are not implementing certain things in their businesses that a big brand might from the get-go, that in order to scale up and in order to really just take off at the rate that they need to, sometimes it kind of inhibits them. And so a lot of times it's walking them through that process of, let's take this, what seems like a small brand right now, but we don't want it to stay that way. Let's treat it like a big brand from the get-go and really tell your story like you're a big brand, treat your company like it's a big brand, but do it on your budget right now. We can find ways to do that and find ways to really effectively tell that story at any place that they're at. But really from the start saying, let's just treat this thing like it's going to scale up to an astronomical level so that you can do that whenever you need to.
And what are some examples of those tools or processes or platforms that you would recommend startups to establish up front?
Yeah, so really it's small things. It's not even really anything like you need to have this gigantic system in place that tracks everything. No, it's things like professional email, going ahead and setting that up from the start. Setting up things like a CRM system. If that's what you need to track your leads, go ahead and set it up from the start. Even if you don't think you have enough leads to necessitate having a CRM, you will thank yourself later when you do have enough leads that you were able to go back and see where you started and really as a way to track your progress. Little things like that, and there are free tools out there for them to use if in fact they do need that. There are a lot of free tools out there at their access that they can implement in their companies right away, just from the get-go, to really set them off on the right foot. You know, professional email is a huge one. CRMs are a huge one, but even little things like social media scheduling platforms and things like that that'll increase your productivity, give you more time to focus on creating, and help you establish yourself professionally from the get-go.
Excellent. For a lot of companies that are starting off, though, it's so much about the product. It's
Right.
like, we just need to focus on making a
Right.
great product, and then people are going to naturally just come to us.
Yeah.
So why is it important, if you're talking to someone that's at that stage, especially someone that maybe is not that much of an expert in marketing or branding, why is establishing that brand up front, that brand story, as well as the visuals for the brand,
Right.
what kind of impact can that have from the very beginning?
Yeah, so establishing your brand as something more than just your product allows you to expand as you go instead of just solely focusing on certainly making sure the product is great. That's really important. But establishing yourself as someone who wants to stick around in the market, as someone who wants to be more than just your product. Typically, my favorite brand to reference is Yeti. It's not just a cooler, right? So it's this really, whenever you think of Yeti, you don't just think of coolers. You think of this amazing brand and the outdoors and the culture that really surrounds that brand. And that's what you want to create. You don't just want to create a great product. You want to create something that people can see themselves in, that they want to strive to be more like and aspire to be. That's what you want to create whenever you create a brand. And so it's really important to not only create content around your product, but to create content around the kind of lifestyle and the kind of culture you want your brand to have, because it's all about your personality, and that is what people are buying whenever they buy into you. They're buying into your personality because they really see themselves in your brand.
I love that. Yeah, and it seems to me that any product is only going to solve a certain percentage of that customer journey.
Right.
Like a product fits, like say a Yeti cooler fits into the lifestyle of someone that you're trying to, you're trying to appeal to. And so by storytelling, creating content around that bigger mission, that bigger
Right.
culture, I don't know, it just raises the perception of how people are going to.
Absolutely. And it brings your customers back. You want customers who are going to stay for life, and especially if you have a one-time product purchase, so something that someone doesn't necessarily have to replace all the time, it's doubly important that you get them to buy into your story, because you want them to come back even if they don't need your product. You want them to come back because they love your culture, they love what you offer them outside of your product. So if that's customer service, if that is just your level of care with your product, you want them to be so bought in that they are evangelists for you, and that even beyond their product purchase, they are influencing the purchases of others.
Yeah, and then it makes it less about competing on price, and people are buying that
Absolutely.
because they are connected. They believe in what you believe in.
Absolutely.
And it's
Absolutely.
like a much more intrinsic value that they're getting out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How about the connection between the brand story and then the visuals of the brand? Because it's kind of, they interplay so much, but often they involve different parts of the brain, or someone's like, okay, here are our values and our vision and our customer journeys. Then how do you translate that into what colors to use, what your logo looks like, what shapes to use? It's like such foreign territory for most people.
Yeah, absolutely. So where I really like to start with clients is typically what they are drawn to the most. So oftentimes they'll come into a meeting and say, oh, I like this. But until we really get them to pull out images that they like, sometimes that doesn't align with what they think in their head that their brain is going towards. And then we couple that with what their actual customer, what their ideal customer is drawn to, and looking at asking those right questions from their ideal customer. What do you want in a brand? What would make sense for you? What kind of lifestyle are you seeing in this brand? What is, what kind of colors and things are you drawn to? So it's coupling what the client actually envisions their brand to be with what the ideal customer is looking for in their brand, and bringing those two together to say, let's create something that marries those two in a really beautiful way, but also resonates with the customer. So Sometimes it's, if they've got some sort of mission behind their brand, some sort of maybe social aspect to their brand, pulling that out and bringing that to the forefront of the visuals and the content. If they have something that is, understood with their brand, so some sort of intricacy with Honeycomb, for example, that we focus on taking elements of that and influencing that in our language for the hive and, a bee and things like that, and bringing those things into the brand to use those really small elements, the things that seem so futile, to really elevate that brand and to take it out across all the channels.
So when a company is, trying to get in sync between what they are, who they are as a company, and what their customers or clients really desire,
Right.
How can they ask those questions? Like, what are some processes? Do they just call people on the phone, do
Right.
surveys,
Yeah.
how do you find the people? How do you do that research up front so you really have clarity?
Yeah, so there are a lot of resources, free resources out there to seek out your ideal potential customers and things of that nature. One thing that we really love to do is to start out with surveys, and what we encourage our clients to do, even on their own, if they would like, is to put out surveys and then use platforms using Facebook groups and other resources to seek out those ideal customers.
So
in
this
a
is
way
going
that
into
is,
like existing Facebook groups and
Yeah,
kind of leveraging
absolutely.
those existing audiences.
Yeah, and finding those in your community, because one way that Facebook groups is really just blowing things out of the water is that they're so niche now. So if you are a running company and you want to find your ideal customers, you're able to go into those running groups and say, hey, you guys obviously have a vested interest in running, in your gear, and you find that to be really important. Would you mind taking this survey and letting us know a little bit about what you care about most whenever it comes to your gear? What is it that what is most important to you? Because sometimes what you think is most important to a customer and what is actually important to them, even visually, are two very different things. And that's a very easy way to get feedback from customers. And, already have people bought into your brand. Now they're curious about you. Now they want to follow up and see what is it that you've got going on that we might be interested in. You've already bought in some people from the get-go before you've even launched.
And they know that you're putting in the time to really understand
Absolutely.
their needs
Yeah.
and speak to them rather than just saying, hey, we built this, buy it.
Right,
You know?
right, absolutely. You want to build your product around your customer, because it really does you no good to build a product that is broken by the time it gets to market. And so we want to take out all doubt before we get to market that our product is something that a customer wants, needs, will buy. And one easy way to do that is to do all of that research up front. And so I really encourage people, especially starting out, to do your research. It will save you time, it will save you money, and particularly on execution, you don't want to execute something that is eventually going to burn out because the customer isn't actually resonating with it. You want to be able to take out all of that doubt from the front end.
When it comes to the point to actually execute and start building this,
Right.
I often see the trap of people focus too much on the visual beauty of something and not as much on the functionality of how is this actually going to sell someone.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit and kind of how you try to find that balance between things that look great but
Right.
also function well?
Yeah, so beauty is great. We really love great design, and everyone really is drawn to great design, but it really does us no good if it's not going to convert. And so that's another area where when you're doing your research, you can find out things that a customer really is looking for in a site. Is it that a sizing chart is really antiquated and that isn't really helpful for them, and it would be much better if you had a video there of someone actually measuring themselves to show you how to measure correctly, so it takes out that piece of your clothes not fitting well. If you're an online store, those questions are the better questions to ask sometimes with the functionality piece. what is it that we can answer through content, customer questions, any sort of things that the customer might have in their mind that they need answered about your product. How can we take content and use that to answer our questions as a functionality piece versus just making a website that's really beautiful and clean? How can we use our website as a house to take out all sorts of questions that a customer might have before they purchase?
That's interesting. Yeah, and there is often this disconnect between the brand and then the content that you're producing. And there's a lot of companies out there they're like, okay, we need to get into content marketing, and so let's just produce 1,000 articles and then 100 videos, but it's not actually answering those core questions. So at what stage, or what's the process for a company really figuring out what those core questions are, and then what types of media are going to be best to really lead the customer down that journey and answer all of their questions?
Yeah, so what I really suggest is that if you do a focus group or if you do any sort of marketing research with a survey, that you ask questions about existing products in the market and where they're not meeting their needs. So if you haven't actually gone to market yet, so you don't have any testimonials or reviews or don't have any beta feedback at all, a great place to do this is in your focus groups and say, what is it about the products that are currently on the market that limit your use of them? What is it that maybe are flaws or things that you would change? What are any features you would add to these products that would have you just so bought in that you're an evangelist for it? Those kind of questions really help you inform. It's almost like an FAQ page before you even know what the questions are about your product. And so using that time before you launch to have those things on the forefront of your mind, and then either being able to go back to the ideation phase and say, let's readjust our product to answer those questions, or if we need to just answer those questions outright and be really transparent, let's just go ahead and knock them out. Let's go ahead and address those before they become things that show up in reviews and things like that. We're trying to anticipate any sort of issues that someone might have whenever they're encountering the product, and being able to just answer those on the front end and then be able to, readjust accordingly. Now, for established businesses, a way that I suggest that they do this is looking at their reviews. What are your reviews saying, especially the negative ones? What are the things that they are asking about your product? Why was it that they had a bad experience? And then taking those reviews and turning them into an FAQ page or a video that answers that. And for the future customer, takes that doubt out of their mind so that whenever they see that review, that question's already been answered for them. It's not something that's just a cloud of doubt around whether or not the product is going to work.
Right, because part of that feeds back into maybe you need to improve the product.
Right.
But at the other side, it's also setting proper expectations.
Absolutely.
It's creating that knowledge up front, so when someone gets it, it's exactly what they were expecting. There's no hidden hidden issues there.
Yes, I highly suggest having very transparent expectations about what the product is going to do whenever you get it. Whether that is through packaging, that's a really great place to tell someone how to use your product, is through very clear packaging and including any sort of client education that you need to whenever they receive the product. That is a super crucial piece of it. But also, whenever they're going through the buying process, that's another chance to educate the potential customer on the product and its use so that whenever they receive the product, it's absolutely what they needed and more.
And I think the final component is in the post-sale, which part of that's direct customer service, but part of it's also like creating, whether it's an email sequence or continuing to engage them on social media. What are ways that you can continue to build brand loyalty and trust over time after someone has already purchased the product?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a really great opportunity whenever they receive your product to already start that process. So what I suggest is creating really beautiful, unique packaging that helps them stay engaged with you. So a really great way to do that is to encourage them to share on social. Social is an opportunity not only for them to put your name out there, but for you to be able to engage with your customer, show future customers that you are really invested in what your current customers have to say about your product, that you are not this, walled off entity, that you really are appreciative and you care about what your customers are saying about your product, and that you show them the love that they deserve because they are bought into your company and now they have a vested interest in you. And so continuing that cycle through social and through other channels is really important, but also engaging your customer after the sale through email is one really great way to do it. But also throughout, just reminding them how appreciative you are for their purchase and asking them to come back or giving them incentives to come back, pre-releases of items just to your customers who have purchased. Things that are exclusive to them because they have taken their time and energy to invest in you. Or even new product releases, having them try out the products before anyone else to see, is this something that you think everyone else will love? Because you already love our existing products, why don't we have you try this at a discounted rate? Let us know what you think. We'll use your feedback to improve, and you're bought back into the company as a whole.
I love that. One of the best stories I heard about that, I heard a speech from the founders of the Best Self journal.
Yeah.
And they were so effective at building a strong community.
Yeah.
Where at first, they had their own Facebook group.
Right.
And at first they were seeding a lot of the content, yet over time, because they really got buy-in and their customers felt like they were part of this larger community, now, they get more, it's more effective for them to get free marketing from their customers, taking photos, and even a lot of their new product ideas come from that community group.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that brands can take that next step and really foster, and I think you've already touched on some of these points, but really foster that community where eventually it's almost like the community runs itself.
Yeah.
I think there's kind of this magic tipping point that happens with a lot of successful brands.
Absolutely. So I think a key piece is customer engagement, and that is not, traditional engagement is not lost anymore. Customer service is one way that I really like to highlight this because it's something that frustrates everyone. More often than not, whenever I talk to people about their customer service experiences online, it's really not good. Typically, 9 times out of 10, you have a terrible experience trying to return something online. So if we can educate through customer service and in ways like that, that's one way you can start to foster that sort of customer engagement to where they will talk about you time and time again on social media, on wherever. But other ways to really engage your community is, like you said, through social media, using social media as a tool, Facebook groups, having some evangelist out there talking about your brand and helping you tell your story about your brand in a way that's really authentic and unique are really great tools to be able to get your name out there. Having 2, 3, 4, especially if you're a small brand, evangelist to talk about you and to talk about your community and invite people into that community can mean a world of difference in how your brand is perceived in the market and how your community grows, especially with the intense online shopping market that is out there. Using tools like that, and also using tools like Facebook Live. Being the face of your own brand is not something that's a bad thing. That a lot of people think that we need to hide behind our brand, that we don't need to be the face of our brand necessarily, but using Facebook Live to be like, hey, I'm a real human. There are real humans running the show. That gives your brand a personality, and it also allows customers to feel like they're engaged with real people, that Your brand is a human brand that they can interact with, and they can ask you normal questions like, what's your normal coffee order? Or where do you like to go to shop? I mean, those are real human questions. We really do. Even if you have a retail store, you have your favorite places you like to shop. Those are normal human questions that you want to be able to do that with your brand and create this sort of community outside of just the purchase. You want your customers to feel like they know you, to feel like they're coming into your living room whenever they're talking to you. And that is one really great tool, using Facebook Live to really drive that point home. Have an Ask Me Anything session. 1 hour of your day, one time a week, a couple times a month. It really, the frequency doesn't matter as much as you actually doing it and executing it.
Why do you think it is that more small companies don't do that? What is there a fear that leads them to want to hide behind their brand? And how can someone kind of break through that? I know it's a hard question to really answer, but what steps can someone take if they're like, I want to do it, but I'm like afraid of the camera, or I'm this or that? It's like, how can they push through that and really embrace themselves as the face of their brand?
So the thing that I tell everybody is, until you really do it the first time, you're going to be terrified of it. Like the first time I did Insta Story or Facebook Live, I did not. I really almost deleted it a couple of times. But with anything new, you just have to get more comfortable with it. And over time you will. Over time you'll become more comfortable in front of the camera. You'll know the right way to kind of, position the camera, or the right lighting and things like that. We all start somewhere. And so my biggest advice to companies is just start. Like, you've got to start somewhere. So better to start now and just do it and figure out what works for your customers than to not start at all and to lose out because you were too afraid to just dive in. And it comes to another thing that I typically suggest, which is to try almost everything. You're not really going to know what your customers grab onto until you try it. And, it's Facebook Live, I will come back to it time and time again, is a great example. I had a former client who they tried the Facebook Live thing out, and they were a little nervous, didn't really know how it was going to go, and now it's one of their biggest sources of community, that people literally put their alarms on their phones to wait until they were going to be on Facebook Live, even though Facebook sends them a notification. They are that bought in to what they're doing, and they've seen tons of success from being able to just go out on a limb, be really vulnerable and open, and say, look, we're just going to try it and see what happens. And it took and was really successful, and is now, one of their main streams of getting information out there about their product.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's and I can speak from experience with this show and just being on camera in general. I grew up with a pretty severe stutter, actually, and so like in middle school and high school, like I could barely get a whole sentence out, and so for me it was a long journey, going through therapy, and then it's like I can't express myself, and then I just did it. I just started getting on camera, and it was really hard at first, and I'm not saying I'm like a master at interviewing at this point or anything. It was like episode 7 or 8 or something like that whenever we publish it. But yeah, you just get much more comfortable. And I think people have this feeling about, I think people wear 2 different hats. They have their business hat, and then they have their actual real person hat. Yeah. And when you're wearing your business hat, you feel like everything needs to be perfect because it's going to reflect poorly on the brand. But then when you wear your customer hat and you actually look at your behavior of what you're engaging with, you watch a lot of content that's like a shaky camera or just someone on screen, or just like maybe not the best like perfect grammar, long form content,
Absolutely.
So is that something that you've kind of found too, that like what's that interplay between authenticity and then things that are need to be polished and perfect?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of room in especially the e-commerce space to just be unscripted, because so much of what we see in content is curated. And there is so much room for uncurated content that is very raw and vulnerable and gives you a space to give people a true look in your life that I think people and customers are asking for, that they are drawn to, that very real, they want to be able to relate to you. They want to be able to level with you. They want to know that there's a real human behind the screen. And there's so much push to get out from behind the screen that the more you can do it through your platforms that you've been given, the better off you are in a lot of cases. That, being a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit unscripted and, oh, the phone just fell. Like, laughing it off, being able to laugh at yourself is so important in business, because if we took everything seriously, we would be miserable. But to be able to laugh at yourself, to be able to say, I'm having a Monday. Like, let's just be honest. Today has not been the best day.
And everyone's had one of those Mondays.
Yes, absolutely. And everyone knows they will absolutely cut you slack if you're having a bad day. You just have to be authentic about it. And as long as you are true to who you are, people are drawn to that. People are drawn to who you are. That is not a bad thing. Who you are and why you created your business is absolutely fundamental to how you tell your story. And all of it is your story. You can't just take yourself out of it. You are your business, and the whole reason you started had to do with some sort of gumption that you got at some point in your life to do something about your situation, and you decided to change it. And that's really important, to be able to tell that and to be able to portray that in a way that relates to people.
I love that so much. So is there any final takeaway that you'd like people watching the episode today to come away with, just in terms of their branding or how to better think about their relationship with their customers?
Yeah, so I would say two things. To the people who are thinking about starting a brand and are terrified because they don't know where to start and they think that it's too overwhelming, I would say it's not, and to just jump. And you will be pleasantly surprised at how much more you have to your story than you think. That you don't have to have it all together to start whatever it is that you want to do. So to the people who think that they have to have all their ducks in a row to actually start something, I would say I definitely didn't whenever I started Honeycomb. So you don't have to have all your ducks in a row just in the same pond to actually execute your idea. Those ideas flow naturally and evolve naturally over time, and your brand will grow into what it is supposed to be eventually. But to the early stage startups and people thinking about a rebrand, there really isn't a time that is too late for you to think about really infusing your story into whatever you're doing. There's not a time that's too late to change the way that you show off your product and things like that. There's always time to reevaluate your story, kind of take a pause and say, where are we and how could we be doing this better? How could we be more effectively reaching our customer? And what is it that our customer truly wants, and how can we appreciate them more? There's never a time that's too late for some great customer service and great customer outreach.
All right. Well, where can people find more about you and Honeycomb Creative Co?
Yeah, so we're on all of the typical social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter. We also have a fun podcast on Anchor. If you have Anchor, that's a great place to hear my ramblings about entrepreneurship. And that really is my vulnerable space to really talk about the day-to-day of what it looks like to run a company. And so I kind of give a very raw space to talk about that. But you can also find us at honeycombcreative.co and see some of our recent work, see a lot of what makes us unique and what we really hang our hat on.
All right. Well, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. This concludes another episode of The Content Engine. And remember, this is a weekly show, so if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode releases. Until next time. Put your message in motion.